AI is no longer just helping scientists read papers. It is beginning to generate hypotheses, propose designs, rank possibilities, and organize parts of the workflow that turns questions into evidence. That sounds like acceleration. And it is. But acceleration creates a new bottleneck. If a system can generate more hypotheses than a lab can test, more designs than biology can validate, and more workflows than institutions can audit, then the question changes. The question is no longer just how intelligent the model is. It is whether the system around the model can turn possibility into evidence. That is the shift this episode is about. Scientific AI is moving beyond answer generation and into discovery infrastructure. But the more it can generate, the more pressure moves to the surrounding systems: compute, power, labs, audit trails, reproducibility, governance, and trust. The future of AI science may be decided less by the systems that generate the most ideas than by the systems that can validate the right ones. Most public discussion of AI in science still uses the language of assistance. A model reads faster, summarizes papers, drafts proposals, suggests mechanisms, helps researchers search fields too large for any one person to hold in memory. That framing is useful but too small. The stronger signal is that some scientific AI systems are entering the workflow itself, helping structure which questions get asked, generating candidates for what might be tested next, and connecting models, hypotheses, experiments, interpretation, and review into a more organized discovery loop. That does not mean scientists disappear. It does not mean experiments become optional. It does not mean a model can declare a discovery true because it generated something plausible. The opposite is the point. As AI systems generate more possible directions for science, the burden of proof becomes more important, not less. To see the shift, look at three signals: a model aimed at a scientific substrate, a system aimed at hypothesis workflows, and a multi-agent workflow that keeps the lab in the loop. The first signal is EVO2. EVO2 matters here because it is not primarily a chatbot story. It is a domain-native scientific modeling story. Arc Institute and collaborators describe EVO2 in Nature as a genomic foundation model for genome modeling and design across domains of life. The system is aimed at biological sequence space itself, the substrate where genetic information is represented. That is an important shift. A general model can help you talk about biology. A domain-native model points toward computational exploration inside the structures biology uses, a stack for exploring possible designs, mechanisms, and relationships. That is why the caveat matters. A generated design is not a validated intervention. A prediction is not a reproduced experimental result. A model that can explore biological sequence space is not the same thing as safe biological engineering, clinical utility, or solved biology. EVO2 expands the map. It does not replace the territory. The territory is still governed by measurement, validation, safety review, expertise, and biological reality. That is the first piece of the episode thesis. Scientific AI can increase the number of possible paths. But more possible paths make validation more important. The second signal is Google's AI co-scientist. Google Research and the associated RxIve preprint frame AI co-scientist as a Gemini-based multi-agent collaborator for generating, debating, ranking, and refining scientific hypotheses and proposals with expert guidance in the loop. The important phrase is not autonomous scientist. The important phrase is hypothesis workflow. In the older frame, a model answers a question. In this newer frame, a system generates candidates, critiques them, ranks them, refines them, and routes them toward judgment. That is not just faster writing. It is a candidate funnel. If this kind of workflow becomes reliable, its value is not more text. Its value is spending scarce human and experimental attention on better candidates before a lab or research team commits resources. But the risk is symmetrical. Not as a reported defect of this specific system, but as a general risk of this class of workflow. A faster hypothesis engine can generate more plausible nonsense, rank ideas that look coherent but fail in the lab, inherit gaps from the literature, and hide weak assumptions inside automated scoring. So the question is not simply whether an AI co-scientist can produce more hypotheses. The question is whether the surrounding process can tell useful ideas from seductive ones. A faster hypothesis engine is only progress if the validation system gets stronger with it. The third signal is FutureHouse's Robin. The Nature paper is titled A Multi-Agent System for Automating Scientific Discovery, and Future House frames Robin around a workflow connecting literature-grounded reasoning, experiment planning or support, and interpretation. That language can sound dramatic. So the safe interpretation matters. The lab does not disappear. The scientist does not disappear. The experiment does not disappear. The significance is that agentic systems are being aimed at the loop between literature, hypotheses, experiments, data, and interpretation. That loop is where science actually happens. Scientific discovery is not just inference. It is observation, hypothesis, intervention, measurement, analysis, replication, revision, and judgment. AI can help with parts of that loop, but the loop still closes in the world. Instruments, assays, experimental design, data quality, domain experts, safety review, and institutions still matter. Robin is useful to this story because it points toward a lab-in-the-loop future, not a lab-free future. And that is where scientific AI starts to look less like a better answer box and more like operational infrastructure. Put those three signals together. Evo 2 points toward models that explore a scientific substrate. AI co-scientist points toward agentic workflows for generating and refining hypotheses. Robin points toward systems organized around the loop between computation and experimental reality. Individually, each is a specific project with its own source boundaries and caveats. Together, they point toward a larger pattern. Scientific AI is becoming discovery infrastructure. Not infrastructure in the vague sense of AI is important. Infrastructure in the practical sense, a system that organizes the path from question to evidence. A discovery stack has layers: data, models, compute, hypotheses, ranking, experimental design, instruments, lab throughput, measurement, analysis, audit trails, reproducibility, review, governance, and trust. The model is one layer, the discovery loop is the system, and once you see the system, the bottleneck begins to move. The scarce resource is not always the next answer. It may be deciding which answer deserves an experiment. It is not always another generated design. It may be testing that design safely and interpreting the result correctly. It is not always more hypotheses. It may be reproducible evidence. That is where the new bottleneck in AI science begins to appear. Not only intelligence, validation. This is the central consequence. If AI can generate more candidate hypotheses, the value of validation rises. If AI can propose more designs, the importance of experimental throughput rises. If AI can search more literature, the risk of inherited errors and citation gaps rises. If AI can coordinate more workflow steps, the need for audit trails rises. And if institutions begin to depend on these systems, the need for reproducibility, governance, and human accountability rises with them. More possibilities do not automatically mean more knowledge. In science, a possibility becomes knowledge only after it survives contact with evidence. That means validation becomes one of the decisive constraints, but it is not a single place. It is not only the lab, it is not only compute, it is not only power, it is not only governance, it is the pathway that decides whether a generated candidate becomes a tested claim, a reproduced finding, and eventually a trustworthy part of scientific practice. Acceleration without validation is not progress, it is backlog. And a backlog of plausible science is not the same thing as discovery. Validation sounds like a scientific word, but at scale, validation becomes an infrastructure problem. A hypothesis does not test itself. It needs a lab, an instrument, a measurement process, a data pipeline, a record of what happened, and a way for another team to reproduce or challenge the result. And when more of that discovery workflow becomes computational, the infrastructure stack gets wider. That is the point of the power becomes the scheduler lens. Compute does not become real capacity just because someone buys chips or announces a data center project. At scale, compute becomes powered, cooled, connected load inside real infrastructure. That logic should not be overextended. We should not claim that the electric grid is already the proven bottleneck for Evo 2, AI co-scientist, Robin, or scientific AI as a whole. But the strategic implication matters. If discovery becomes computational, then scientific discovery inherits computational constraints. Models need compute. Compute needs energy. Lab-in-the-loop systems need instruments, throughput, data pipelines, and experimental capacity. Audit needs records. Reproducibility needs traceability. Governance needs institutions that understand what happened and why. Power becomes one scheduler of what can run. Lab capacity becomes one scheduler of what can be tested. Auditability becomes one scheduler of what can be trusted. Reproducibility becomes one scheduler of what can become knowledge. That is the real infrastructure frame. The future of scientific AI is not just a race to generate more possibilities. It is a race to build the systems that can choose, test, record, and trust the right possibilities. This is why auditability matters. In ordinary AI demos, the output is often the object of attention. Did the model answer? Did it sound intelligent? Did it propose something interesting? In science, the answer is not enough. The path matters. Which papers shaped the hypothesis? Which model step generated the candidate? Which agent or workflow ranked it higher than the alternatives? Which assumptions were carried forward? Which experiment tested it? Which measurement changed the conclusion? Which human reviewed the result? Which claim reproduced and which one failed? Without that trail, scientific AI risks producing plausible claims with unclear provenance. With it, AI can become a structured discovery system where ideas are generated, filtered, tested, audited, and either strengthened or discarded. That is, trust infrastructure in a scientific sense, not trust as a slogan. Trust as the ability to reconstruct the path from question to evidence. So the story of scientific AI is not just that models are getting better, it is that models are starting to move into the machinery of discovery. That is powerful. It is also constraining. Because once AI can generate more possible science than institutions can validate, the limiting question changes. Not just can the model produce an idea, but can the system test it? Can the lab run it? Can the compute support it? Can the power infrastructure sustain it? Can the audit trail explain it? Can another group reproduce it? Can experts trust what happened? The systems that matter most in scientific AI may not be the ones that generate the most hypotheses. They may be the ones that help decide which hypotheses deserve scarce validation. That is the shift from answer engine to discovery infrastructure. And it may define the next phase of AI science. If this episode changed how you think about scientific AI, leave a comment with the bottleneck you think matters most. Better models, better labs, better validation, better audit trails, or better power and compute infrastructure. And if you want systems-level analysis of what it actually takes to deploy AI in the real world across infrastructure, reliability, power, compute, governance, trust, and operational constraints, subscribe to Quantum Convergence AI. Because the future of AI science will not be decided by possibility alone. It will depend on what can be proven.